Well, hello, folks, and welcome to today's Conversations on Leadership, powered by Life University. I'm your host, Dr. Gilles LaMarche. And as we do every week, I pick a leadership quote that I believe exemplifies the guest that we have. And I believe that our guest today will say, great choice of quote for me. And this quote for Dr. Patrick Porter is, a leader is one who knows the way, who goes the way, and who shows the way. Our guest today, in my opinion, is a gentleman that has done all of those three and has certainly have shown me the way. His name is Dr. Patrick Porter. He is a PhD and the founder and chief BrainTap officer at BrainTap, which was created with a singular mission in mind, to better 1 billion brains. You heard it right. Their mission to better 1 billion brains. Dr. Porter has been featured on the Wall Street Journal, People, Entrepreneur, Inc. magazine, on ABC, NBC, CBS, and the Discovery Channel. He is head of mind-based studies at Quantum University and is a licensed trainer of NLP. He is the author of 6 books, including his popular Thrive in Overdrive, How to Navigate Your Overloaded Lifestyle. And as a personal user of BrainTap, I can tell you that he's a great man, doing great work, leading with intention, with compassion, and with integrity. So Dr. Porter, welcome on today's Conversations on Leadership.
Well, thank you for having me, and that was a very gracious intro there. Thank you.
Well, my pleasure, and thanks again for joining us. So my first question to you today would be, what are the qualities that you believe are necessary for today's great leaders in the world of business, in the world of family, in any world? What are the qualities that you believe are the most important?
Right. When I was thinking of that, your quote is spot on, because I chose my mentor that I had. He was actually somebody who was out there doing. I looked for like the Rambo of self-help, not the person who just took a couple courses and wrote a book about it or something like that and didn't do it. So I was looking for like a field general, and somebody that, you know, when you see them off camera or off stage, they're somebody you really want to hang out with. You know, so that's what I'm looking for. And then also they need to be inspiring. They need to, you know, I like people that have gone through the challenges and come out the other end, not bitter, but, you know, saying, hey, you know, we pray not to avoid hardship. We pray to be able to manage it, you know, and get through it with strength and integrity. And I think those are the leadership qualities. When somebody shows that and they have the compassion, you know, not everybody's going to be at our same level. Let's say they might not have our same education. They might not have our own economics. But if you give them the right environment, they can learn and grow and thrive. And that's what I'm looking for in a leader. And that's what the leadership people that I've associated with, that's what I'm seeking out.
So of those qualities that you just mentioned, which ones did you innately own? And which ones did you have to actually go and learn, maybe from the mentor?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I probably had to learn them all, you know. So when I was younger, I was very fortunate. My dad was an alcoholic, and I always say I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic because he went and got help. You know, he got help, and I didn't know any of those things. I didn't have a good example. I didn't have a good role model, and so I was acting out, you know, and really a troublemaker until I realized, hey, you've got to be that thing that you want to be. You can't just talk the talk. You know, you've got to experiment with it. You've got to test, and you've got to be willing to fail. And I think and I think what I had more than anything was I'm stubborn. You know, I'm like a dog with a bone. If I want that bone, I'm going to go after it, and I can fail 1,000,000 times, but I'll keep going until I succeed. But the real traits that I wanted to acquire, I was from a low economic family. We were 9 kids in a 2-bedroom house. We didn't really have much. I didn't have an example that said, hey, here's what prosperity looks like. But my dad did show me that you can change your life and you can help others do it. And I think that's a key, you know, and I think that's why I really love dealing with chiropractors, this lifestyle. You know, you live the life. You don't just, or at least most of the ones I hang out with anyway, I mean, we just met a new chiropractor here in our hometown. Now we're friends. Because those are the kind of people you want to hang out with. You know, they're touching, moving, and inspiring people, and that's what I look for.
You know, you mentioned the word stubborn, and sometimes parents will say, oh, my child is so stubborn. It's so upsetting. He or she just won't listen to what I say. But you took stubbornness And you actually sort of shifted it on its head and you said, I think being stubborn is a quality. So give our audience the difference in your mind between stubborn being a liability to stubborn actually being a leadership quality.
Right. Well, so many people get locked on to their old belief systems. So they have this old belief, this old saying, or they think they know the way. And even though it's not working, they stay stubborn to those things. Stubbornness in my thinking is when you have a Northern Star, let's say, or you have a goal in mind, and you might not know how to, I go into things, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to be open to learning from the people around me or finding that expert that's going to train me and teach me. And even when people say no, I can tell you right now how many times I've heard no, or, in fact, I bought my books back from my publisher because I sold more books than he did. Because, the thing is that I think you got to pick something that you know in your heart. When you start tuning into your heart space and you start saying, hey, what am I really going to do? And when you're of service to the world, like when our mission statement, we want to serve by helping a billion brains. And right now we need it. And chiropractic is a big part of that. I can't do it on my own. Obviously, I can't reach a billion people. I need at least a million, Life University graduates, let's say, or whoever, so those are the people that are going to really do it because we can only share our message to our community. And I think, and one of the things about stubbornness, I think that's a good thing is I'm not going to be somebody I'm not. So many people try to be somebody they're not. And I love Tony Robbins. He's really inspiring. You go there, but there's only one Tony Robbins. You're not gonna, unless you're 6'8" or whatever, and and you have all that charisma, you're not gonna be him. But you can take a little bit of his shine, let's say, and say, hey, how can I apply that in my life? And the stubbornness is to say, I'm not finished yet. I think the best way is I'm not finished yet. I can make mistakes. One of my favorite sayings I always tell to my clients or the students that I'm teaching is that a failure isn't final, that it's feedback, and that anything worth doing well is worth doing terribly at first. So many people, that's how we learned in our life, and like that little kid's going to learn to walk. That's the stubbornness that, they'll fall down every conceivable way. But as soon as they walk right the first time, and those that have children know this, they hardly ever fall down again. Because at that young age, we don't have all the judgment. Our nervous system says, you know what? This is the neurology that works for me to walk and balance across the room. That other neurology doesn't work, so I'm going to junk it out. But so many people with stubbornness hold on to the old philosophy or the old techniques or whatever it is, and they're not willing to learn, grow, and adapt. And we're in a new environment now. I mean, from when I started in practice in the 80s, in 86 to now, it's totally different. I mean, we didn't even have computers, really. I mean, I remember getting an Atari computer and thinking that I was in the future, so,
and you were in the future.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit right at the beginning about mentorship. Are you willing to share who your mentor was and how your mentor and you actually interacted to the point where it allowed you to grow and become the Patrick that you are today?
Yeah. There's two mentors that really changed my life when I first started. One, I typically share this story, especially with chiropractors, is because at church, my mother stood up and said, let's say a prayer for Patrick because he needs a job. And Stan Fuco, who was a chiropractor, came up to me and said he would give me a job. And of course I had to earn it. He didn't give me anything for free, but he said, I'll give you the space and you can work with my clients. And let's put a relaxation module in there. And he taught me really how business worked, because we did a stress class every week. He gave away a lot of service, but he had a great business. And, when I watched him run his business, and he and his brother had an office in Scottsdale, Arizona, and in northern Arizona in Glendale. And those were, he taught me. But then for me, when I went out on my own, I met a guy named Jerry DeShazo, who's a business-minded person. He originally, he became the person that actually told me, Patrick, you're good, but you're only one person. You're not going to reach your goals. Because I told him back then I was going to help 1 million people. But after I sold 3 million cassettes and CDs, I figured I better change that number, think a little bit bigger. And so what he did was he told me, he said, Patrick, you're going to starve to death because you can't sell. And he taught me, the number one thing he taught me was to listen. And so when I started listening in my, what chiropractors would call report of findings, and listened to them. And then he showed me, this guy was 93% of all banks in the world used his software. he knew how to listen. He would go into a bank and get them to change their whole software system to his because he had asset management business. And he taught me really salesmanship, but he said, nobody should feel sold. If they feel sold, you did your job wrong. You should
they should
enroll
want
them.
to buy, right?
Yes. Just like, and so he taught me about pain points, and you get them to, you lead them to water, but you can't make them drink, different things. And he was a master at the mind. He's actually the one that got me into NLP because of my therapy. My background is Christian psychology. So I was doing counseling, with churches. I was working at a church in Phoenix, Arizona at the time with part-time before Stan got me the job with him. And he said, you can only see so many people. I mean, I do still love doing that, but I opened up everything, just opened up. He said, you can do more than what you think. He got me to think beyond, because I thought I was going to be a factory worker or something like that. And then just to even go and get my degree, I still wasn't ready to practice because I didn't have the self-esteem, the self-confidence, and he helped build that up. I think that's what a mentor does. It says, hey, I've been there, I've done that. Follow these rules and be willing to stumble, but really always be humble. Like you said, that's a learning state. You got to be curious and hungry.
There's one quality that you mentioned that actually not one of my interviewees has actually mentioned yet. And I've done a number of them for today's conversations on leadership, but the quality of listening. Share a little bit more about that with our audience, if you would.
Well, in my field, and I think chiropractors are in there too, in psychology, of course, a lot of times the listening works, but when you're listening, you actually people want to feel like they've been heard. Like even staff, we do staff meetings with our group at BrainTap. We have 19 employees. So when we do our staff meetings, some of them are online or whatever, we give everyone a chance to speak. Because if they don't get a chance to speak, they don't feel heard. And our brain works on connection. So when we talk about a leader, a galvanizing leader, like somebody, you go, wow, I'll follow that guy. Like people say, I'd follow that guy into war. I want to be in a foxhole with him. Well, that's because that person feels the connection. That connection happens. Most people might not identify with it because listening is a lost art, right? But the reality is, if you think back to the people you really like having conversations with, they don't feel like they're always waiting to butt in on your conversation. Some people are sitting there thinking the whole time, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? How am I going to say it? What's going on? And you can tell their wheels are turning. They're not even hearing you. So if you sit and we call it reflective thinking. And we actually learned listening skills. Like there's ways to motivate people where you hear, they're called values, right? We call them values, or in NLP, they call them impact words. So these are words that drive behavior. So when you think about, if I said to you, freedom, flexibility, independence, these are all value-based words that mean something different to you and to me. A leader knows how to use those. So if you listen to a political leader, I'll use that as an example, the one that has those key words they're using in their speech, people just galvanize to. They're hearing them. But if you can turn the tables with your team and you can listen to them, then use their words back. You can say the same thing, but couch their information into it. Now the neurons in their brain are wiring and firing, and you're being meshed with the solution. That's what a leader does. And then when you don't want to be separate from the solution, if you're a leader, you want to be part of the solution. And you don't want to be the person that they talk about if you're not at work, in a negative way. You want to be talked about, hey, we're really missing them today. We really could help with the people that make the most money in the world actually are problem solvers. So think about chiropractic as an example. People come in, I don't know what's wrong with me, doc. I can't do that. They are problem solvers. Those that can create the quickest solution, by listening, in doing it. I think that's a key here. And most great leaders are great listeners. They might not know it, but they are.
My mentor taught me that from this statement, listen with the intent to understand, not with the intent to respond. And you spoke to that most people listen and they start hearing a question and automatically start formulating an answer. And now they're in their own brain attempting to respond to what the person speaking with them is actually attempting to share. And they never get into that state of listening for the purpose of understanding the other human being. And I think that's what you're talking about as it relates to building deep-seated connections with another human being is that a leader has an ability to connect with his or her people. Therefore, the people automatically want to follow the leader. Is that what I heard you say?
Exactly.
In different
Exactly.
words?
Yeah. In fact, one of the last Life University events we did together, you had a speaker there that actually pointed out, which I was applauding her silently because I didn't want to break into her talk, but she was saying that they have now, even addictions are a lack of connection. And so it could be touch, people not being touched, they know there's a problem with that too, not being hugged, or, this isolation that people have experienced over some experiences that's why isolation, depression happens. They're not getting a connection. But on an even they're not being heard. People are broadcasting their messages all over social media. If they don't get enough likes, kids are actually committing suicide because they're not being heard. They feel like, oh, I'm not being validated or I'm not being heard. And so as a leader, you'll go up a notch in your team's book when you start just sitting down. And I think the way you said it was very good, listen with the intent of understanding. Then your brain is very fast. You don't have to think that much to respond. I mean, most leaders, you don't have to sit there and compute, be in the flow, that flow state, be present. I think a leader is present. They're not stuck in their past or their future. They're like, what's happening right now? How do I solve this problem? Or how do I make this moment meaningful if you're having an interaction with a staff member or a patient or a client?
And I love that because, again, another story that you're sharing, which is something I learned from my mentor, was the concept of present time consciousness. When you're with someone, be with that person. When you're doing something, do that thing and do it right and really, really be focused. So maybe in closing, as it relates to intention, I want to talk a little bit about intentional leadership. How do you lead with intention? And what advice can you give to our listeners on how they could become better leaders from a space of leading with intention?
Well, I think one is don't keep it a secret. If you keep everything a secret, nobody knows what you want. Our brains are based on outcomes. So when we're thinking about, when we say, it's been said, all unhappiness stems from unfavorable comparisons. So if they don't know what they're supposed to do, they won't do it. So with the intent, if my intent is to have the team, let's say, solve a problem for me, I'm going to give them, here's three. I want everyone to come to the meeting with three examples of this. And I want a fourth one that's crazy. We'd never do it as a company. And the reason I do that is part of creativity is just thinking of bizarre things, like the guy dressing up like a clown and created the Coke commercial, something like that, because he got people to think differently. So we always do that at our company. We're always doing crazy things. But the thing is, you've got to set the intention. You can have intention. You've got to have in your mind clearly as a leader, you need to know the outcome. But the system changes based on your reaction to those outcomes. So if you clearly define what your intention is, now you don't have to disclose all your data, everything like that, but they need to know at a higher level, like my intent, even being on this call, is to get one more brain in that billion, and if I can get one more brain clicked off, okay, one more, I've done it today. And every day I do something for me. I do something every day that's going to make me money the rest of my life. Today, I just did actually a peak performance session that we're doing with Julie Arden, who's doing a whole program with Google. So I did the relaxation program for that. And that's going to make me money the rest of my life. So that's my intent every day, is to do something that's going to survive me. Let's say, when I'm off this planet, what's going to be left? It's going to be my voice. That's going to be left for me. So you got to figure out for yourself what's going to be left at the end of the day.
I love everything you shared, and certainly you're having an impact on a lot of people. If people want to know a little bit more about BrainTap, this is not a commercial, but some people may say, "Hey, how do I learn about BrainTap?" Of course, they could just Google it, but make it easy for them. How can they go and learn more about BrainTap?
Well, the simplest to go braintap.business. If they go there, they can actually get a free copy of that Thrive and Overdrive book. No credit card necessary. It's not a commercial. They can just go there and experience it and learn about it. Downloading the book, they'll learn. Chapter 4 in that book talks about the technology. So for those people that want to know, hey, where's the science? They can go there, read that book. They can read it on their Kindle reader or their smartphone or something like that. Totally
Well,
free.
thank you very much, Dr. Porter, for your sharing your insights with our audience today. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be with us. And I look forward to seeing you live again real soon.
Okay.
Have a great
Thank
rest
you.
of
And
the
this
day.
has been great. And good luck with the rest of your interviews.
Thank you.